College football is one of the greatest sports in the world. The rivalries, the pageantry, the passion, there's nothing like it. But there's one problem we can't ignore, and that is the way media bias shapes the sport. For years, networks like ESPN have pushed narratives that favor certain conferences, most notably the SEC and to a lesser extent the Big Ten. This bias doesn't just affect how fans see the sport, it directly impacts rankings, playoff chances, and the opportunities available to teams outside the media's spotlight. This has only been exacerbated by the college football playoff, which started at 4 teams, increased this year to 12, and is currently under consideration to expand to 14 teams. Many fans hoped that the 12-team playoff would allow for more parity within college football postseason, but throughout the 2024 season we learned that ESPN and Fox continue to push an agenda that hurts the fans, group of 5 teams, and most Power 4 teams, all to benefit the big TV networks and the SEC. With the first ever 12-team bracket being released just a few weeks ago, we got a glimpse into what the future of college football could look like, and unless things change, the future of college football could be one that literally only includes 16 to 20 teams. There is, however, a way to fix the sport. It would require a massive restructuring of the current setup, but at the end of it all, we would be left with a product that would benefit all parties. Before we go any further, if you love college football and want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button. At 10,000 subscribers, we will be doing a massive giveaway, so make sure to subscribe to help us get to that point. Also, make sure to like the video to help other college football fans see the channel, and with that, let's get into it. The plan is simple. Restructure the current college football setup to one more similar to the NFL. Take the top 64 teams in college football by fan base, TV revenue, football success, and potential for future growth, and put them into the top league in college football. Each program would receive the same amount of money from ESPN and Fox, and the playoff structure would be built so the top teams in each division would get a shot at a national title. No committee picking and choosing, no brand bias, just the best teams based on record alone. This would do 2 things. First, it would eliminate the never-ending push from people like Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti for their conferences to make more money, have more representation, and be quote-unquote more important than the rest of college football. Most of the teams in the Big Ten and the SEC would make the new league anyway, just by nature of how things shake out. And 2, it would allow for every team in college football, regardless of league, to have an actual, realistic shot at having a meaningful postseason. By making clear divisions within the sport, teams like Boise State, Memphis, Tulane, or Army actually have a chance to play for a national championship. We all love a group of 5 Cinderella story, but in reality, those stories only push the top programs to be more aggressive in excluding the rest of college football from the future. If we moved to these divisions, the group of 5 would get to compete for an actual national championship every single year. Whereas right now they have the illusion of competing for a national championship, but in reality, they will never be championship contenders. We'll start with the obvious teams to make the cut in tier number 1. These teams are Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, USC, and Notre Dame. This first tier includes a mix of the top brands and highest performers in college football. These are teams that have no real argument of being left out. They're consistently top 25, only have a down year once maybe every decade, and they're consistently in the hunt for a national championship. Now in tier 2, we have the following 8 teams. We have Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, Penn State, Washington, Texas A&M, LSU, and Clemson. Tier 2 includes the teams who also realistically could never be left out, but they're maybe a smidge less consistent than the top teams. Tier 3 is probably the largest tier, and these are teams who are safely in but aren't in the top 15 every single year. We have Florida State, Miami, SMU, BYU, Utah, Baylor, Colorado, Virginia, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Missouri, Kansas State, Auburn, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa, Iowa State, Arizona, Arizona State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Virginia Tech, TCU, Texas Tech, UCF, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State. Tier 3 has a lot of teams. All of these teams are teams who you would probably expect to be included. Some are new in the Power 4 like SMU or BYU, but those programs have already proved to be contenders in their conferences, with SMU making the playoff and BYU being one bounce away from making the conference championship. You also have some historically great teams like Auburn, Florida State, and Miami in there. Some of those fans may be upset that they weren't in a higher tier, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which tier you're in as long as you're in. Each team in the top division would make the exact same amount of money from the media rights deal. Tier 4 is where things start to drop off just a little bit. These are the low-level Power 4 teams and some Group of 5 teams. You could consider these teams to be bubble teams, and this will round out the rest of the league. So we have Maryland, UCLA, North Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Michigan State, Minnesota, NC State, Pitt, Oregon State, Washington State, Syracuse, Duke, Boise State, Houston, Cincinnati, Stanford, Memphis, Kansas, UNLV, and Kentucky. And that final tier will round out the rest of the league. There are some omissions, current Power 4 teams who didn't make the cut, as well as some newcomers, which we'll cover. But again, this completely covers the Group of 4. This would be the top tier of all of college football, and this is the group of teams who would compete at that top level. We do need to talk about some of the teams who didn't make it in. Not only did teams like Boise State, UNLV, and Memphis make the jump up to the top league, but there were a number of current P4 teams who didn't make the cut. These teams include Boston College, Wake Forest, Vanderbilt, Indiana, Illinois, Rutgers, Northwestern, Purdue, and Cal. These teams have historically been among the worst performers in the Power 4, and the teams above them absolutely deserved to make it over them. I know Indiana just made the college football playoff, but as we saw in their first game against Notre Dame, they absolutely should not have been included in the field of 12. They played one of the weakest schedules in the entire country and got dog-walked in the 2 games they played against good teams. I know you could make a similar argument for SMU as they performed horribly against Penn State, but their potential for future growth is much greater than Indiana's. SMU is in a massive market, has a huge fan and donor base, and has proven to be serious about contending in college football. Indiana has never been a serious football program, and they never will be. The playoff structure would be as follows. 4 conferences of 16 teams. Conferences would be regional to limit cross-country travel. To make things more regional, we would lose some current rivalries. For example, Florida would no longer be in the same conference as Georgia, but they would still have the opportunity to play each other in an out-of-conference game. Each conference plays 2 preseason or out-of-conference games, and then 10 conference games. At the end of the regular season, rather than having a conference championship, the playoffs would begin. Whoever had the best conference record in the regular season would automatically be crowned the conference champion. The top 4 teams from each conference would make the playoffs, and would go into a 16-team playoff. The top team in each conference would get the top 4 seeds, depending on overall record. For any ties, tiebreakers would be based on out-of-conference record and or any applicable head-to-heads. After that, the remaining 12 teams would be seeded based on the same criteria as the top 4. This would be completely based on record and nothing else. No bias, no committee, no strength of schedule arguments, just the best 4 teams in each conference. This would again eliminate many of the problems we currently face in college football. Is it perfect? No, but neither is the NFL, and there's a reason that it's so much more successful and consistent than college football. There would no longer be media bias towards certain programs versus others, no more lobbying for the SEC and the Big Ten to dominate the postseason, and the group of 5 teams would actually get to compete for their own national championship. I want to hear from you guys to get your thoughts. Do you think this model would bring more stability than what we currently have in college football? Would you be interested in having a split in college football, or would you prefer to stick with something closer to our current model? Thanks again for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to comment down below and like the video. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel to see more content like this, and remember to let me know your opinion in the comments below.